The Saga of ShaHaNon, Book 2, Emperors and Exiles. Chapter 8, The Archbishop. The Archbishop's palace was accessed only through the grounds of the Cathedral of St. Tyra Ellen. Orion and Jamie did not have to even look at each other as they reached the great double doors. Burdened with their travel-worn, torn, and emergency-mended packs, Jamie matched his pace to the limp Orion walked with, so they came forward in match step. In perfect unison, they dropped their packs at the foot of the 3 steps leading up to the altar and sank to a knee. Both men bowed their heads and fell into a prayer trance. Neither of them were happy, and this was the best way to reflect that. It would take hours, and the Archbishop would have to wait for them or go to bed. Either way, they felt it well worth the sore knees. They took their time and let habit and their soul-bound energy work together. They both allowed the energy to pass and flow between them, sharing the cares and powers the other held. Wizard became healer, and healer became wizard. It was with care that they came out of trance and made certain each other was breathing slowly before they seemed to lift free. They should have settled in their depths before they rose from the trance, but the unity of energies lingered only a moment. The balance of energy and peace was replaced with a mutual unease, and they were left feeling even more tense with each other. That very feeling had led to years of not even attempting to use that magic. Only rarely did they play this game now. Both of them held parts of their souls in reserve behind very carefully constructed shields that both were aware of but said nothing about. The fact that as soon as they had gone to one of the murder sites, they were called up to the palace was an even worse sign than the uneasy distaste of the fog. Despite their discomfort with each other, what seemed to be looming over them was bigger, and they naturally leaned towards each other for balance and strength. They rose and lifted their heavy packs. They didn't look at each other. Neither one of them wanted to see if the other felt the same unease and shielded distance. Now was not the time to acknowledge it or to show it in any way to the outside world. A young priest at the side bowed and led them to the Archbishop's chambers. The Archbishop of Fairwa was not at all pleased to have been kept waiting. Jamie had to work to hide his smile, but Orion, as always, kept a perfectly stone-cold face. The man they were taken to was a human in his 70s, and looked it. He was thin as a rail and nearly bald, giving him a rather skeletal appearance. His long, bony hands gripped his cane as he stood glaring at the two of them. Orion, with perfect obedience, went to him and bowed. The man stuck out his hand to be kissed. Orion did not touch the man, but bowed deeper to kiss the ring he wore.
"Your Grace,"
Orion said simply.
"I heard you decided it was time to pray,"
the Archbishop said in a stern voice that was not the least amused. His eyes were on Jamie. The blond priest followed his partner's example, trying to hide his distaste for it all.
"It seemed only right to pray for purification,"
Jamie said,
"before we came into your house."
He bowed with a hand on his chest. He might distrust the man before him, but he was a performer and knew his way to charm.
"You are bishops. You should always walk in purity."
The old man scolded them.
"Yes, indeed,"
Jamie said.
"We might hold the title,"
Orion said.
"but we remain hunters, only now we do it in the city limits. Kos is not a pretty city. Time for reflection and prayer is very limited. I assumed you knew this, and that was why you asked us here, that we might have peace to think and pray."
Jamie was impressed at how well Orion was playing this. Normally, the man would say the blunt truth and seem either insane or very hostile. Several arrests must have tamed his temper a bit. That, or he was very worried and treading lightly.
"2 bishops come into my city, and they do not come to me. You do not even send word that you have arrived and are working in my city. The constable may have asked you to come, but I am still your superior, and you should have come to me at once."
"We did not think our short visit worthy of your attention,"
Orion said with a shrug, once again taking the attention off of Jamie.
"Your Grace would forgive us if it seemed a slight. You are a busy man, I am sure, and we are just over-glorified hunters."
The Archbishop, as well, seemed oddly surprised at Orion's manner. He slowly looked back to Jamie.
Don't you think that before you teach a class on magics that you should have done a purifying blessing?
Very true.
Jamie said simply, bowing his head again. The Archbishop nearly snarled.
You have spent time with the constable?
Only a short time,
Jamie said.
It is his men I'm teaching. He seems very busy, and we have not had much chance to meet. He was good enough to play billiards one evening, but he was very tired and said little.
He has not asked for your aid on any cases.
Why would he?
Jamie asked.
Is there a vampire in the city?
Possibly.
The old man said with a wave of his hand.
It need not bother you. As you said, rest and retreat would be good for you both. The matter is being dealt with.
Then I shall worry only for the teaching of the men that I came here to educate in the name of God.
I expect to see you at morning mass then.
They both nodded to him before they were led from the Archbishop's meeting chambers to quarters of their own. Jamie glanced around the very ornate room as he tossed his packs to a chair.
What do you think?
He asked. Orion grunted as he set his own packs on the floor.
I don't think he likes you, Jamie.
Orion said, sinking into a chair.
Really? Whatever gave you that impression?
Jamie replied with mock shock.
I don't think it will matter too much. You will be very busy with that class and not here to be pestered by him.
And you?
Jamie asked, as he dropped into a chair.
I suppose I will try to study a little, rest a little.
Orion shrugged.
I was rather enjoying just walking around the city.
He lied as he looked around the room. It was overdone to the point of being gaudy, not pertinent at all. Under the layers of wooden paneling, gold gilding, and almost chaotically decorated furnishings, the original Perton walls were all but hidden away. He had no doubt that the room had magic set in place to both watch them and listen to them. There was little doubt that Jamie knew it as well.
I guess if we are to be at the mass in the morning, we should try and get some sleep,
Jamie said. Orion sighed.
I do not like this place,
he said, getting up.
Why?
Jamie asked, more of why Orion would say it out loud than why he would dislike it.
It reminds me of my childhood. It stinks of wealth. I think I prefer the woods.
Jamie laughed a little.
You're an odd man, Orion.
Orion smiled.
That I am?
He agreed.
You care what bed you have?
No,
Jamie said, glancing at the set of beds that stood on the back wall with just a side table between them.
Is that normal? 2 beds in a room like this?
It is a guest room.
Orion shrugged.
Does it matter?
No. Just odd we are sharing a room and didn't get separate chambers.
If the Archbishop wants to house us for the stay, then why would he be expected to give us separate chambers? We aren't that important.
Just odd, I guess.
Jamie shrugged it off and got up to unpack so he could get into bed. It was odd, and they both knew it. At least there were 2 beds this time. Several times they had been put into places with just one small bed. One or the other of them always made a point of making a bed on the floor or in a chair. They had enough rumors and trouble, and didn't need to be set up for more. Intimacy of the bedroom sort, between men, was forbidden in the Empire these days, even between soul-bound partners. The last thing they needed was false accusation. Orion tried to sleep, but his mind kept coming back to his worries, to the darkness that had hunted the jeweler, and now the movement in the fog. He did not sleep at all, but watched the sky beyond the window slowly turn pink as morning drew closer. The city of Broston, like all of the old Perton designs, was a mix of lines and balance. Grace was found in smooth, flowing energy and the paths it followed. Simplicity was an art of stone and magic. The smallest detail was seen to and became far more powerful than all the ornate boldness of humanity. The basilica had once been an example of that, but in the last 1,000 years it had been built around. Its yards and parks had been turned into streets and gray stone buildings. The building itself was altered and layered on with so much ornate stone, carvings, and paint that it was not even recognizable. The once white, smooth lines were hidden away to show off the wealth of the church in complexity that was distracting and overdone. Orion did not like it at all. He hated the alterations that were even more ornate inside the walls than on the outside. He had grown up in untouched Perton halls of what had once been the private estate of the King of Valrene, and the layering of complexity seemed very offensive to him. It felt like something sacred had been defiled. Where carefully laid out gardens and waterways once calmed the soul on the way to the basilica, there now was a narrow pathway and side streets from the Archbishop's palace to the private side doors, all lined with tall stone walls. On the outside of the walls, gardens were no more, but had become walled-up walkways connecting shops on the street level to apartments above them. To make it worse, the fountains were no longer flowing. They were seeping up just enough water or holding enough rain to be waterholes for horses and other domestic animals, but nothing of grace or beauty. The collapse of the water system did not help the city with smell or cleanliness, not even here on the palace grounds. Orion tried not to be annoyed by it all, but focused on walking to the place he and Jamie were headed toward. Once again, the lack of a true king had turned beauty into ruin, and that knowledge, along with the stink of the city, made him angry and short-tempered. Those in power did not even try to fix it, but built around it, as it was too difficult and expensive to find other ways to see to the water needs of the city. They had to pass through an indoor garden gate to a courtyard that ran along the front and sides of the building. Here, candles burned. Priests and acolytes prayed in silence and privacy before entering the basilica itself. The holy alcove up front was no longer simple in its holiness as it had been in the days of the empire, but was lit with candles and wizard lights, covered in gold leaf and set with 1,000 small golden figurines of angels. It was dazzling and almost made Orion feel dizzy in the complex layers. The rows of pews that faced the altar up front had changed little and seemed oddly out of place in the show of wealth and grandeur. They slowly made their way to the side and took a seat at the end of the pew. It was there that the altar boys sat. The boys tried not to stare at the two famous men, but failed. One wide-eyed boy who looked at Orion was so in awe he wasn't about to pay attention to the Mass. Orion ignored him, as he tried to ignore everyone who looked at him like that. Somehow, when the Mass started, Orion was not surprised that it was Gallus, not the Archbishop, who led the service. They fell into the rhythm of the words of the Mass. It had been years since both of them had been to a celebration that they were not part of. It was odd to sit there side by side, with nothing to do but follow along. It was a rare person who did not know the words. It seemed all the world knew the motions. But sometimes Orion could not help but think it unlikely all the world felt the truth or power of it. Orion tried not to think as he knelt. His knees ached with the changing weather and the length of time he had spent on them last night. His back was starting to ache as well. There would definitely be a weather change. Jamie cleared his throat softly as the people filed up to be blessed and to get a pinch of bread and a sip of wine. Orion looked over just enough to see his partner. He followed Jamie's line of sight to the balcony above. There was a man up there, back in the shadow, trying not to be seen. Orion wasn't sure how he knew that the man wasn't a priest, but a mercenary. Not just any, but one of the watchers who had followed Orion in the city. It must have been something about how he stood. Orion wasn't sure, but he knew in his gut it was truth. Over the years, he had learned to trust his instincts. Orion let his eyes move along the back wall, not showing he had even seen the man.
Something's up,
Jamie said softly. Orion had to agree. He hadn't been able to sleep for the feeling that he was walking into a trap with his eyes shut. He didn't like anything about this trip. Things only seemed to be getting worse, but they had nowhere to go. They were caught in a current that they had no hope of escaping. Trying to keep their heads above water was the best they could do. As the last of the faithful went through the line, Bishop Gallus moved to serve the front pew. They all stood up to receive his blessing and his gifts. The man muttered his prayers and smiled at each boy as he gave them their bit. He was a friendly-looking man, with a fatherly appearance to him. He seemed an odd pick for a bishop. Usually, only the most rigid of priests got power, men like Orion had once been. The idea that Armand was talking to this fatherly-looking man didn't seem so strange as he served the Mass.
His blessing upon you, share in his strength.
The bishop held up the pinch of bread for Orion to take. Orion took the bread in his hand, showing his rank as ordained priest that allowed him to hold it. He put it in his own mouth himself.
Share in his life.
Gallus offered the chalice of wine. Orion took it in his fingers and lifted it, but he didn't take any. He merely let it touch his lips. Bishop Gallus moved on to James and went through the ritual again. Jamie and Orion sank to their knees as the chubby man ate the last of the bread and drained the wine. He and his boys cleaned up and cleared the holy articles before they knelt as well. The bishop got up and began his last blessing. There was a final note for the people before he and his young aides made the procession down the aisle and out. The bishop was a great actor. If Orion was not certain that he had played billiards with him, Orion would have thought that the man had no idea who he was. That ability had likely kept Gallus alive long enough to become bishop in the first place. It was hard to trust anyone with such acting skills, though.
I have to get to the barracks,
Jamie said, getting up with a wince.
My knees are not so happy about the stone steps.
He smiled.
But it was worth it. I'll see you later.
Watch your back, James,
Orion said, slipping into the pew to sit back and let the crowd leave before he got up. He would spend the day in the holy compound, go down to the library to see what he could find. Maybe he would be inspired, and something useful would fall into his hands. He would play the game, and his watchers would see him as just an old hobbling priest, too battered and tired to be of any threat.